First, to open Ansys, we start by searching for workbench. Okay. You select the workbench application. Then once you open it, you have variable options here. You can select Fluent because we will work here with Fluent. Okay, so as you can see here, one of the options in Ansys is Fluid Flow Fluent. Now, in Fluid Flow Fluent, we have several steps to be able to solve our problem. The first step will be the geometry. In this part, we construct our domain. So let's say we are interested into a ventilation application. We draw the room with inlets and outlets in the geometry. In the meshing step, we mesh the domain. What do we mean by meshing the domain? In this case, we divide the domain into very small elements, okay? So we divide it into cells, and then we will be able to solve for different variables as temperature, velocity of the flow field within each of the cells. In the setup part, we will enter the boundary conditions for the system. So for example, what is the velocity of flow at the inlet, at the outlet? What is maybe the pressure, if it's subjected to atmospheric pressure or to a different pressure, we can impose this. You can consider, for example, heat fluxes from surfaces. So in the setup, you can set all conditions of your problem, and you will select which schemes to use for your numerical solution. So this is what we will go over in the setup part. Now in the solution, you will run your computation, and Ansys will use schemes and algorithms you have selected in the setup to solve for the different variables of interest as the temperature and velocity of the flow. And finally, once the solution is converged, you can explore the results at the final step. So we'll start first with the first step, which is the geometry. Okay, so to start with, we do a right click here. Now for the geometry, you have several options. You can, for example, draw it on AutoCAD or on and you have some softwares that can be linked to Ansys. Okay, you can use space claim geometry, or also you can use design modeler geometry. So you have several possibilities. And as we said, you can also import geometry. So you can use Inventor, you can use AutoCAD, but I advise you to use the design modeler geometry, okay? Because it will allow you to avoid some complications, because when you import, you might have some complications by importing a geometry to CFD. So it's better to build in your geometry from zero using CFD if possible, okay? So now we will open the geometry and we'll start to build it, okay? We will consider as example, as I told you, a ventilated room where we want to study the ventilation configuration, okay? So we will start with a simple example. We will draw a box. Inside this box, we will draw a cylinder to represent a human body. And also we will represent inlets and outlets by rectangles on walls, okay? And then after doing this, we can move to the mesh part, okay? So now we'll wait to open the geometry. So sometimes it might take some time to open. Okay, so as I told you, in the geometry part, we just have to draw the geometry of concern, okay? Now, some important features that we should know about the geometry. In the geometry, you have the option to build several objects. So you can create shapes like spheres, cylinders, boxes, okay? And then you can name them also so that you can identify them when you move to the mesh step. So we will see how to do this once the geometry will open.